Cape Town's rival taxi associations yesterday agreeing to a ceasefire after weeks of taxi violence that saw 22 people die in just 2 months, or 2 weeks, I beg your pardon. Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula announcing a 12-step roadmap, including the deregistration of any association that resorts to violence. Let's make sense of where to from here and bring in CATA Secretary Mandla Hermanus, who joins us now via our video link. Mandla, great to speak to you. Thanks for making time, sir. So the Transport Minister has described this peace deal as being tight. Is that something you also agree with?
Yes, absolutely. Because the deal has the support of both organizations who have been involved in the conflict.
Does that mean the violence is behind us, though?
Yes, we'll do everything in our power to ensure that there is no flare-ups again of the same violence we have seen in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, perhaps I started where I shouldn't have. As you and I speak today, what do you know about the situation on the ground? Are your operators actually working this morning?
Yes, our operators are back on the roads from 4 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, and the presence of commuters, have they responded? Because that's obviously a gauge on whether or not they believe in this deal.
Look, the commuters are still apprehensive. You know, we've seen them, but not in the numbers that we usually see. And I assume it's going to take some time for us to gain the trust of the commuters.
Which is where I was hoping we'd go. Many people are obviously rightly reading this as a situation we've seen before. Some kind of intervention takes place from government. We get told of some kind of agreement that takes place, only for us to be back in a situation where there's violence again weeks down the line. What will it take, do you reckon, to convince commuters that it's different this time around?
You know, if it's up to us as leaders in the taxi industry, because if we honor these agreements that we sign, and there is no violence, and then that will mean that we won't be having commuters who are not sure whether to use our taxis or not. So it's on us actually to play our part, to work hard to gain the trust of the commuters, because they need to be sure that when they get into our taxis, they get into a safe taxi that is going to take them to work and back safely.
Do you reckon that's where it should end, though, Mandla? I mean, again, in the past, we've heard of these kind of agreements taking place, and whilst there's a criminal process also taking place to try to get to the bottom of who is behind, quite frankly, the loss of life, are we not at a stage where the industry should be looking at perhaps legal ways of introducing deterrence for those who are part of the violence?
Look, there are structural issues that both the industry and governments and the regulators need to tackle so that we get to the root cause of the violence. Like things like where associations recruit members when there are no operating licenses available for those members, and where associations change allegiance from one motherboard to the other. So if we can tackle those things and bring those things to an end, and then we will be starting to deal with the root causes of the violence. Because if we eliminate the unhealthy competition for membership, you know, if we tackle those kinds of issues, but those are at a structural level from both the associations as well as government. If there could be stricter regulation there, so that it's not easy for people to simply move from one association to the other and then claim the rights to operate on the previous association that they belonged to, that had supported the issue of the operating license. So if we can tackle those issues, then we will be dealing then with the root causes of the violence in the main.
Mandla, I think you were part of the briefing yesterday, led in part by the Transport Minister, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I might recall you mentioning that perhaps the money that government was meant to give to the two associations that are at loggerheads should go to the victims of those who've actually died during the violence that's taken place in the weeks gone by. How much support is a call like that receiving in your quarters?
Look, I've canvassed that with my association, and it's got the full support of CATA as an organization, because the two mother bodies, they've got companies, and these companies are receiving money from government in a program called Blue Dot. It's an incentive program. So when we perform well, we get in the region of 300,000 a month. So because we have been involved in violence, that money has been withheld for the month of July, so which means both organizations won't be getting that money from government. So my suggestion was that, how about instead of that money being taken back to the fiscus, how about using that money, instead of giving it to the organizations, then we use that money to support the families who have been victims of this violence.
The real tragedy, of course, is that some of the victims were just ordinary commuters on the way to work or back home. Do we even know the victims by name?
That's the other thing. You know, to us, these people, you know, are just numbers, that there's been a passenger and there's been a driver. And my argument is that we should give these people names. You know, they are human beings. They are not just drivers or operators or passengers. We need to visit these families and see what role did these people play to support the families. Because at the moment, to us, they are just numbers, and it shouldn't be.
Right. You know, Mandla, some people might be listening to our conversation and get the impression that you as an association are speaking as if you almost were also helpless in the events that took place in the past couple of weeks. Is that the case? I mean, as an organization yourself, do you feel that you too are in some ways inadvertently part of what's actually taking place in the industry?
Look, it's the failure of leadership. I mean, we have failed as leaders because it shouldn't have gotten to where it got, you know, where people get killed. If we are able to stand up and be on TV and speak as if we are leaders, you know, where is our integrity? You know, so absolutely we have failed. We have failed the people of the Western Cape. We have failed the economy of the Western Cape. And we have failed our kids, our mothers, you know. So we, as leadership, we should own up.
And then what happens thereafter? What do the consequences look like, do you reckon?
Look, we have to relook at what kind of leadership do we want in the taxi industry. You know, and what support does that leadership get from government? Because it's an open secret that within the taxi industry there are elements, people who might not be in leadership positions, but who have influence on what the leaders must do or must not do, what decisions they may take or may not take. So if we bring those people on board, those people we know they've got influence, but they're not in leadership positions, because it's pointless for a leader to claim to be a leader when it comes to taking decisions. That person must then go back and consult other people who are not in leadership positions to get a mandate every time.
Tell me a bit more about that. Who are these individuals who are influential outside the industry?
Look, there are people, I wouldn't be mentioning names, but there are people who are very influential, say at our general meetings, but those people won't want to be in leadership positions, and yet you get the sense that those people are so influential that if you take a decision, they are able to overturn that when you go back to report. And we have seen that during the 3 weeks of negotiations, where one organization would have to go back and consult when you have all the leaders in the room.
Wow. Part of the 12-step, call it, deal that the minister outlined yesterday included one where he suggested that government is going to make some kind of call for an inquiry and this is under the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. From your standpoint, given what you've just mentioned, does that sound like the right solution to you?
Yes, I mean, if anything that can get to the bottom of the crime, because one of the things that the taxi industry, I mean, across the country, the taxi industry has actually created a whole industry of hitmen, guns for hire, because taxi operators don't go around shooting people. It's some other people, faceless, who go around doing all these kinds of things. But those people, they don't do it for free. They get paid. So if...
Paid by who?
We can get to a stage, by the associations, if we can get to a stage where the law enforcement, they don't just arrest the people who do the shooting. They arrest the people who commit the crimes, but more and above that, the paymasters get arrested. That's what we are praying for, a day when the person who paid someone to kill someone is arrested, other than just the person who committed the actual killing.
And the person making that payment, as far as you're concerned, that individual is known to the industry?
Those are people in the industry.
Part of the story, of course, is that this is nowhere near the end. We're told there's an arbitration process still ongoing over the B97 route. Are you confident that too will end well?
Look, the B97 is the subject of the arbitration, and we are committed to waiting for that outcome, and also to live with that outcome, whatever it is. And if one is not happy, then one might have to take that on judicial review. But other than that, we are committed to binding ourselves by whatever decisions are made by the arbitrator.
Mandla Hermanus, thanks very much indeed for your time, sir. Really appreciate your speaking to us on the AM Report. Mandla is the Secretary of CATA, that's the Cape Amalgamated Taxi Association. Once again, thanks very much indeed.